Hello everyone, my name is Charlie Yi, and welcome to my presentation on why prize checking is one of the worst parts about the Pokemon TCG. Thematically speaking, prizes as a game mechanic makes sense. You get 6 Pokemon that are hidden similar to what you'd see in an actual Pokemon singles battle, either in the games or within the anime. In game, the whole idea of prize mapping is to add some variance to the game. For better or for worse, sometimes it makes games incredibly frustrating due to prizing key pieces of your engine or key counters for your opponent's deck, or it adds a little bit more of game-to-game variance. Sometimes you get that extra card that you needed to do for the next turn, or sometimes it just gets shuffled back because of unfair snap or something like that. It also adds a key deck building puzzle for players to solve, answering key questions like what happens if this gets prized or is this ratio too greedy are good questions to ask and answer while deck building. For example, when I play Gardevoir, sometimes I wish I had a third Gardevoir because there are times when I prize two and the game just becomes unplayable, at least when I played Gardevoir during the time. As a result, people need to check their prices for matchup counters, one-ofs, key pieces, ace specs, and more. I'm just using this ends deck to show some of these cards that may be important to come up specifically for ends. So what exactly is the issue? My thesis is that the act of manually figuring out what your prize is immensely time consuming and is a stain on an otherwise pretty decent game. On average, players spend between 1 to 2 minutes of a game figuring out their most important prize cards. This is 2 to 4 minutes in a 30-minute best of 1, or up to 12 minutes in a best of 3. Especially in a best of 3, this amount of time is insane, especially since rounds are only 50 minutes, and then you also have to shuffle up, do your cutting, figuring out who goes first and second, all in 50 minutes. Spending anywhere from 6 to 12 minutes in a given best of 3 spent just looking through your deck is just an insane amount of time. It also reduces the mental load that you would have throughout your game. Sometimes people don't write notes, or sometimes you don't know exactly what you have missing, even after going through your deck once or two times. In an effort to save time / play with maximum knowledge, people practice their prize checking and or use different methods to prize check faster. For me personally, I took it in a different approach. I come from different games, so I didn't have a lot of time to practice prize checking. But for me, I used different rarities and borders to figure out which cards I needed at the moment. So for example, my Psychic Energy when I was playing Gardevoir was all the gray border, the ones that you'd see in packs now. But I made it a specific point to reach out for the 3 Darkness Energy and yellow borders, or even different rarities, just to make sure I knew when I was going through my deck which cards I needed at that moment. I also have the same for my Night Stretcher, my Counter Catcher, and a couple of my stadiums that were available for full outs: Artisan, Mystic Garden, and more. While other people go through the whole deck entirely, this is a lot of wasted time, or they split their time, make sure that their opponent's not too bored, and prize check multiple times throughout their turn, in 15 to 20-second intervals. Or the worst of all is people just foregoing prize checking entirely. This is insane. Playing without knowledge of what you have prized has definitely cost some of my opponent's games, and could have costed me games too if I didn't pay attention to what I had prized. The thing is about emergent gameplay and prize checking specifically is that the ability to prize check doesn't really add any emergent gameplay. In my opinion, it is just strictly a waste of time. It's an unnecessary skill that you have to learn. It's an unnecessary skill that you have to learn because you need to know what your cards are. But it doesn't have to be this way. Let's just take an example in a Dragapult match. As we know, Dragapult, they need to stall out a couple of turns for their explosive turns with Dragapult, and usually one of the ways they do that is with Bidoof. Now, a common occurrence may happen where you prize both Bidoofs, and in a matchup where you would like the Bidoofs, the opponent can infer that you have these 2 Bidoofs prized. So it doesn't really add anything when it comes to playing the game. Like, your opponent already knows that these Bidoofs are in the prize zone, and they won't be seeing them throughout the game unless it's really important or something like that. So, prize checking as a whole doesn't do anything at all. To illustrate my point more about emergent gameplay, I wanted to talk about a different game entirely. Let's talk about Super Smash Bros. Melee. There's an advanced technique called L-Cancelling. It's shielding right before a move finishes to reduce the lag of the move. As you can see on the one on the right, the link on the right in red, he moves a little bit faster because he pressed the L button just a couple of moments before the other person did, resulting in less end lag and more fluid gameplay. And for the most part, because you're expected to do this for every aerial that you can, most people argue that, why does L canceling exist to begin with? And I definitely get where they're coming from. And in fact, it's in a similar vein of price checking. Like, why does this skill have to be honed? Why does this have to exist besides the competitive advantages it gives you? Well, in these two examples, some people opt to not. L cancel for example, on the left to get these slide off or these edge cancel aerials, despite not having to L cancel. And some people take the risk and L cancel these moves anyways, but some players opt not to. And it also adds the idea of L canceling correctly can also be manipulated by the opponent. They have a smidge more of the defensive option by angling their shield. And this is unique specific to Melee, obviously, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point that at least there's some emergent gameplay that comes with a mechanic like L canceling relative to something like manually going through your deck for price checking. And this point is contentious enough that different top players have different opinions. Cody Schwab over here says that if we go back, he says on the left-hand example, it's better not to L cancel these moves. While when I made a thread looking for these examples, Nikki said, which is a number 9 player in Super Smash Brothers, also says, no, you should probably be L canceling these moves anyways. And who's to say that these are both correct or incorrect people, right? These are different play styles, and it just adds to the uniqueness of Melee. For both games, there's an essential competitive mechanic to the game, but prize checking has no unique / emergent gameplay added to it, while L canceling does. But that's enough about Melee. Let's talk about the real rule change solution, which is to let both players check their prize cards, shuffle them around, and proceed as normal. Originally, I wanted this rule to be a little bit different. I wanted to make it so that your opponent chooses your prize cards for you, but this changed some of the interactions. This is to prevent cheating, such as when people would have their marked sleeves, or they could figure out, while their cards are face down, exactly what they had prized in what given position, right? Whether unintentional or intentional doesn't really matter. It originally was to let people, the opponent, choose the prize card for you. But this unintentionally nerfed or buffed certain cards within the rotation. And so, for example, this would buff cards like Team Rocket Split Bug, which would let your opponent give you the prize card that they deemed worse for you, or it would buff or it would nerf certain interactions like Redeemo Ticket and Chansey, because then you as the player would not have the option to take the prize that Chansey would be in. Now, you may see this rule change and be like, whoa, hold on, Charlie. Doesn't this change the game? Why not to do it on first ball search instead? On first ball search, Nest Ball, Artisan, or whatever cards within rotation, people typically, especially in playtesting, people typically go through their entire deck, and then they also flip over the prize cards either before or after, because they're doing it for playtesting purposes. You're not doing to practice in a real tournament game. So why not on first ball search? Well, this game is made for children and should not be convoluted at all. Reminding your opponent they can prize check after their first ball search rather than on game setup is a pretty, one would say, negligible barrier, but it is a barrier nonetheless that we should try to reduce the complexity of the game as much as possible without ruining its depth. And the rebuttal that I also heard is that this will change the decision-making process compared to not knowing your prizes beforehand. And while this is technically true, I'm going to prove to you guys that this doesn't actually matter as much as you think. So over here, because I played last format, right? I played in Regulation G. So this is when I was playing Gardevoir alongside a bunch of the other decks. And so I have the top 8 or some of the top 8 decks over here and showcasing whether they opened going second, both a draw card and a search card. And another point to look at is the percentage of costly, because this is a really important number. Typically, when we play Pokemon, the sequencing goes as follows. You want to you want to either search for your known cards, your most important cards, and then draw to see what you would play afterwards, or you can draw for a few missing pieces and then search the remaining pieces that you would be missing otherwise. With this percentage of both costly, this definition is quite specific in that it's either costly in terms of discards or it's costly in terms of both cards being a supporter. So say Lily's Determination versus Arven/Petrol or something like that. And what you'll find is that the percentage of a player in their opening hand opening both these costly cards at the same time is around 16%, and most of this number is taken up by Gardevoir, which is currently out of this format. So in reality, the percentage of something like this happening is a little bit lower, to be honest. And I just have some notes over here that show some of the decision-making points that would happen throughout when you open both these costly draws and costly supporters, or exactly what they are and what decision-making process that may come with it. So like, and I definitely get what people are saying. Like they're saying that I definitely get why people are frustrated, don't want this rule change or don't really think about these rule changes, is because it may affect how the game plays out. And so for example, like if you open a Lily's Determination and an Arven in your first turn, and generally speaking, you need the Arven either for a you need the Arven for a secret box or something like that, but you're not aware it's prized yet. Most people might activate Arven first thing and then realize secret box is not there. But if they had known that secret box is there beforehand, they would have acted, say, Lily's Determination instead. So when this happens, like then obviously Lily's Determination becomes the ideal supporter to activate relative to Arven. But why is this such a bad thing? Why, like, as a player, you want to make the most informed decision, and you're already at the mercy of the 6 cards that are prized in your prizes anyways. Why not make the decision-making process as much as possible? At least when you misplay, it would be to your own self rather than the decision-making process, rather than luck of the draw and not knowing what was in your prizes beforehand. And so you have the chance to play optimally rather than leaving your ability to play optimally up to chance, if that makes sense. So overall, as a trade offer, all players involved would receive a few more minutes in their 15-minute round, more informed decisions and reduced mental load, and then you as the Pokemon company or someone else, they would receive minor gameplay implications. An example like this is truly quite rare in the grand scheme of things. Throughout a tournament, this could happen maybe a few times, and even then, there's typically reason to cycle your cards. Like if you're playing with only 3 cards in your hand, you would probably want to Lily's Determination for 8 fresh new cards anyways. So there's just food for thought, and I think it's really important that players consider, changing the rule, or the Pokemon company changing the rule of how prize checking works and allowing players to check their prizes. And with that, thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have more videos talking about other things, not just Pokemon TCG, but also for Yu-Gi-Oh! And other things as well. Thank you very much now for your time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.